What if the thing you've been called to build has been quietly revealing itself through your whole career? Today, I'm joined by someone who brings energy, strategy, and heart into everything she does, Natalie Siston. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Sangal. I'm a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career. Because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we're here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you'll hear stories from people who've navigated big career transitions themselves. So you can see what it's really like to make bold changes and feel inspired to create your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. Natalie is a leadership expert, keynote speaker, certified coach, and the lead global presenter for Positive Intelligence. She's also the author of the best-selling book, Let Her Out, Reclaim Who You've Always Been. Her career spans higher education, Fortune 100 leadership, coaching, content creation, and her story is a beautiful example of how curiosity, clarity, and small decisions can lead to powerful transformations over time. In this conversation, Natalie and I talk about how growing up in a town of 600 people shaped her leadership style, the breadcrumb that led her from psychology to coaching to entrepreneurship, what it was like to walk away from a stable corporate job to pursue her vision, how positive intelligence transformed her life and helped her step fully into her mission, the origin of her book, Let Her Out, and why permission granted is her next calling. This episode is for anyone who's quietly been building something and is ready to give themselves full permission to go all in. Welcome, Natalie, to Your Next Success. I am so thrilled and excited for this conversation that I'm getting to have with you in this moment. So thank you for being here.
Well, I'm very excited. I think we're going to have a very energetic and information-filled and hopefully very inspirational conversation for your listeners.
As you know, part of my desire for this podcast is to help people understand the story behind the story of people's careers and their journeys. So I'd love to kind of understand from you. Tell us how your journey began. Where did you grow up? What were you interested in? What did you think you wanted to do?
Oh my gosh, I think this is going to come up throughout because I think we're all dropping breadcrumbs our entire lives. And it almost takes you being in a career for 20 or 25 years to zoom back and be like, okay, I see it. And we'll talk a bit about my book. And that was really the inflection point for me to look back at all the breadcrumbs I've collected. But I think where I grew up is extremely important to the story of my life. I grew up in a town called Republic, Ohio, USA, for those who may be listening internationally. And that is a town of 600 people, Caroline. It is the place where everybody knows everybody and everybody's business. And I learned from an early age that there are typically two types of people growing up in that type of town. They hate it because they don't want people all up in their stuff and knowing their business and being told on and tattled on. Because this is back in the day when you had party line phones and no digital device, Wi-Fi. And quite frankly, where I grew up, like only recently got like high-speed internet because that's how rural it tends to be. But at any rate, I was on the opposite spectrum of that. I really appreciated growing up in a small town. I appreciated knowing people. I appreciated people knowing who I was, who my family was, what was happening. And I've carried that with me throughout my life and my career. Like so much so, I live in a brand new neighborhood. My husband and I built a house 2 years ago, and they're still building around us. And a family moved in down the street a couple months ago, Caroline, and I have not yet introduced myself to them. And I feel horrible every time I go by. And it's like, I feel like our world has turned to this place like, oh, I don't want to impose when I know for sure that those people are probably would gladly open stores in
Absolutely.
their home.
Yeah.
And so I've made it my goal, like this month, I will make sure I do that because it's important for people to know they're welcomed. But that's where I grew up, and it's created a lot of who I am. It took me living in a lot of different places, different sizes of cities, geographies, working with different people to really appreciate it.
Fun fact, I grew up in Danville, Ohio, at least from first through sixth grade. So that was, I think, right around 1,000 people. But I appreciated that small town environment. For me, they were very welcoming. I also learned very quickly you had to be careful of who you decided to maybe complain about because it's somebody's cousin. Like everybody's somebody's cousin. They're all related. You have to be very positive, upbeat all the time and deal with any conflict internally.
Or just be ready for the backlash if you indeed stepped on the toe of the town sheriff or something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's cool. And so when you were growing up, what kinds of activities, what kinds of things did you do, or did you have a thought that when I grow up, I want to XYZ?
Yeah, so let's start dropping the breadcrumbs for your audience because we'll get through the path as we have our conversation today. I was always interested in human behavior from the time I was a little kid. And what I also learned growing up in a small town is when you don't see something, you don't know it's possible. So growing up, I thought that I would be a teacher, or I thought I would be a lawyer, or I thought I would be a newspaper writer. These are all things that I wrote for my local paper growing up. I shadowed an attorney. So I saw people doing this thing and I thought, okay, these are the boxes I need to go into. So going into college, I thought I was going to be pre-law with a journalism major and political science. That was my, I was going to do this. And it didn't take me long to realize that I didn't want to be an attorney. I worked in the state government in Ohio for a while and realized that things move really, really slowly there. And I don't want to live a slow life. And so I pivoted and I put a double major in psychology into place because, back to your question about growing up, did I know? I did science projects every year, and that was a big deal growing up. Like your science project was the whole thing, and you had to come up with what your hypothesis was and what your study is going to look like. And then you present it in the school gym. And if you do well enough, you get to go on to the district science fair. And aside from the one project I did about composting, which I think my parents hated because I had little boxes of compost around our entire house, I started doing human behavior projects. I did things like sibling psychology. Does the number of siblings you have affect your whatever, fill in the blank? And then color psychology. Does the color you wear, the color you're studying or sitting under have an effect? I did something on age and psychology. It's funny to me looking back, well, didn't you know? I should have known, obviously, that I would major in psychology from the work I did as a kid, because no science teacher was saying, hey, do these psychology-based projects.
At all. I didn't even know. Honestly, I was probably in my 30s before I realized that there were things that were science beyond the hard sciences that I chose. Literally, I did not know. I think I had such an aversion to maybe dealing with some of the things that I had kind of blocked. I never took psychology. I never took any of that. I thought genuinely, because that's kind of in the environment that I grow up with, that anybody who had maybe mental challenges were challenged people, not that every person has this thing. So the fact that you also grew up in small town Ohio, science was it was imparted on me, at least in mine, that, this is something girls can do. This is something girls would be able to do. I recognized that from a young age, but I didn't know. I didn't know that softer sciences are still science, and it's all just one big experiment.
It is. We are all living one giant experiment is how I like to think of days that feel particularly hard. Maybe that's my coping mechanism, like a big experiment. And what variable are we going to test today, right?
Yeah.
What I also appreciated about growing up, I have one older sister, and I have two parents working full time when I grew up, and we always had dinner together in the moments we could because, as we got older and busier, it didn't always happen. But my parents always talked about their work. And I was a geek.
What did they do?
My mom she started off as a secretary and admin at a bank, then moved on to support our church's regional office. And then her ultimate career, she spent her last 20 years at the local public library, where she started in a fiscal administrative position, and she ended up, I call it the COO position. For it's like it wasn't her title, but that's what she did. And so it's really cool to see my mom, with a 2-year college education, do that kind of work. And then my dad always worked in like factories, assembly-based work. And my dad was in and out of work growing up. And that I didn't realize until I got older about how much of an effect that had on me, because I learned a lot about what's hard about work from my dad's stories. We can come back to him a little bit in our conversation today, but I was always interested and intrigued about the colleagues and the relationships. And so when I took my first organizational behavioral psychology class in college, I was staying after one day to, I don't know, just use the desk to write notes. And the teacher stayed, and he's like, you're really intuitive about this. You really get this stuff. And I wish, Caroline, so if there are moments, so for all your listeners, there are the moments where people were like, okay, and that's the day she decided she was going to do this. I didn't. I ignored him. I just took the compliment and I put my head down. So I'm like, who am I to receive this type of feedback? I was scared, I think, because I didn't know what that meant, because what he was suggesting was not on my path. I was a senior in college.
Yeah.
I was engaged to be married. I was preparing to move across the country. And I was like, I can't have a variable thrown in right now. I have so much. And so I just took that for what it was and got a great grade in his class, really enjoyed it. And then, less than a year later, married my college sweetheart. He was in grad school at Stanford. So I'm 22 years old, moving across the country in 2002. So this is post whatever Great Recession that is, into Silicon Valley with not a tech degree. So I sat on the couch for about 8 weeks after I moved there. Not 8, maybe 8 weeks, waiting for one of the many, many jobs I applied for to come to fruition. And I ultimately ended up getting a really cool job at Stanford's Alumni Association. So I'm the type of person where my parents didn't graduate from 4-year colleges. So my sister and I are first generation college grads. And I loved watching her experience at a very small liberal arts school in Ohio called Baldwin Wallace. I went to the Ohio State University. So at the time, the largest campus in the country. So talk about opposite worlds, from small town to the biggest college. So I'm, going across country as a 22-year-old, no job, brand new husband. We were actually living in his advisor's house sitting. So we didn't even have our own place. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Amazing is that, though, because that's a lot better furnishings than you probably would have been able to get.
True. Yeah. And then when I got the job, we then quickly started to go furniture shopping and use their front room to store things in. Yeah, we laugh a lot because I consider myself to be very successful and very fortunate. Same with him. And we've joked with our kids a lot. We're like, when we got married, we had 2 things. We had love and debt. So we're like, everything we've built around us, we've built, and we're really proud of that. And so at any rate, I ended up working at the Stanford's Alumni Association while my husband finished his degree, and I had an amazing time. I mean, if I could go back and relive a job, that would be it. Just because of the people I was surrounded with, fun work. It was always intellectually stimulating. So that's what I did for the beginning of my career.
It's amazing. And then how did that transition, leaving the Stanford position, and how long were you there? And then what'd you do?
Yeah. And once again, good questions to ask, and for people seeking mentorship and such. So because college was so crucial to where I feel like I ended up in my life, I thought it was just natural that I work in higher education. So at this point, I thought, well, my husband will always work in higher education as a professor. So I'll naturally just always work at the college where he is. And so this was just what I thought. I was planning to go get a master's in higher education. And I was talking to one of my mentors from undergrad, Felix, and he said to me, he's like, just time out. He said, I would actually encourage you to get a different kind of master's degree. And I said, oh, well, say more, because you have that degree. It's funny to hear you say it. He's like, I would recommend you get an MBA. And I said, oh, okay, tell me why. He's like, well, you can always work in higher education with an MBA, but you can't always go work in business with a master's in higher education. And I'm
Nice.
like, okay. And at the same time, the CEO of the president of Stanford's Alumni Association, he said to me, have you thought about getting your MBA? And I had not. That was nothing ever on my list of thinking about getting an MBA. And so I actually started applying to MBA programs as my husband was getting ready to graduate with his PhD, and ended up getting into my alma mater, Ohio State, on a full fellowship, and then stars aligned, and he actually got a faculty job at Ohio State, which is where he still is. And this is very unusual.
Nice.
Most
Yeah.
people do not go back to their alma mater to teach. And so we have pinch me moments quite a bit.
What does he teach? What is his area?
He's the chair of the mechanical and aerospace engineering department.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Okay, so you're at Stanford. You get these seeds planted that maybe you do want to go back to school. Stars align. You get to come back to the area that you know and love. You go to grad school to get your MBA. He starts a faculty position, and life is amazing. Then what?
So then I jump right back into almost where that conversation left off with that professor who said, you're really good at this stuff. And so I really jumped back into the organizational behavior. I thought I would go into HR. I thought I would go into some type of people ops role. And here's what I learned in my MBA program. No one hires interns for that. And if they do, they either pay very little or pay nothing. And once again, remember our conversation, my husband still and I had love and debt.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is ridiculous. My classmates are getting these $10,000 a month internship offers, and I'm being told, oh, we'd be happy to have you, but we can't pay you. And I still to this day, it drives me crazy. I want people to earn their worth. You should not be doing free work unless it's for a very specific reason. So I ended up taking a marketing internship over the summer for a big brand. And I was so good at it, Caroline, so good at it. And I hated it. I mean,
You can be successful by all external measures and still not be happy or fulfilled. And when you hated it, help me understand, like, what did that feel like? What did that look like? And did you listen to your?
Yes, thankfully I did listen, and I'll tell you where I ended up and why that was a great decision. I knew and it's hard to say because if anyone who I worked with at that period of time, like lovely humans, they were working, I don't know, 12, 14-hour days. And I don't know what it was. It's always something about me has been, I need work-life balance. And I know we throw that term around a lot, but to me, that means I am not chaining myself to a desk for 12 hours. I'll happily go home, get back online if I need that type of thing. But I saw people in the office when I came in still there and sending emails 2 hours later. I'm like, that's red flag number one. Because I was also, my husband and I were planning to start a family soon, and we knew that would be hard. And then just the work. I didn't enjoy the work. There wasn't a calling there.
Okay.
So at any rate, I got a great offer. They were like, we love you. Will you come work for us full time? And that's the dream, right? That's why you do an internship in an MBA program, is to get a great job offer so you can just enjoy the heck out of your second year of the program.
Yes.
And I sat on the offer because I knew it wasn't right. And then a financial services company in Columbus was starting a rotational program that year and called in a group of people to interview. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. And so I went in to interview. And because I knew I had nothing to lose, I already had a great offer, even if it was doing work I didn't want to do. So I went and interviewed, and I was my full self. I was authentic.
That's amazing.
Right?
And you're 20-something, and you decided already to go ahead and just be your full self.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this didn't always
cool.
happen. Like I was 28 when I graduated with my MBA. And so I ended up taking that position, and I worked at that company for 12 years. And I honestly could still see myself working at that company if it were not for coming across the work I'm doing now in coaching, in speaking, in just helping other people find their best and highest self.
So what was it that made you leave an established place that you'd been for 10 years? What was going on? And then how did you make the decision to do that next step from there?
I get this question a lot because I think a lot of people outside looking in are like, oh, Natalie, I want to live the life like you live. I want to know, how did you make the leap, right? How did you make that decision? And so for me, it wasn't a magical wand moment. It wasn't an overnight knee-jerk thing. What happened for me, and I think it's worth kind of explaining a few different steps in this process, is I attended an event for high potentials at my company, and I was almost 35. And I was sitting by our facilitator at lunch, and she had this way about her who just made me feel like I could share anything with her. And she's like, hey, tell me more about yourself. What's going on? I'm like, yeah, I'm just like meh, meh. And she's like, I know. She's like, actually, when I'm not facilitating, I'm a coach and I help people get through their meh. Do you want to talk about this? And I had never heard of this thing. And
Right.
so I had a call with her, and nervously, I went to my manager and said, hey, I met this person. And I had a very good, close relationship with my manager. We were very transparent with her about stuff. I said, would you sponsor coaching with this person? And she said, yes, I will do that. So step number one, knowing I was at a good company, they were willing to invest in my development, but I had to ask. So if anyone
Yeah.
listening here is like, oh my gosh, I would really like to do this, but I don't know that I can afford it, ask your manager. You never know what they're going to say. Just please ask. And then from there, I had an amazing transformative experience. And she said to me, she's like, what were things you enjoyed doing as a kid that you don't do anymore? And I said, well, as a kid, I was always writing and speaking. I grew up as a lifelong 4-H member, and other kids raised cows, and I did public speaking. I've been doing public speaking since I was 8 years old. She said, okay, well, then go start doing that. And so our coaching ended up being a plan to map out what does it look like to do that? How do I actually take the steps and feel confident to do that? This was 2016. So I said, I want to speak external to my job every quarter. And I did that, like easily got those slots filled up. Just coming up with topics that I was excited about and going to the local chamber of commerce or the women's group in my town. They were always happy to have someone come in and do that speaking. And a little bit past this experience, I was talking to a colleague at my company, and he said, well, you seem like someone who would be a great coach yourself. Have you thought about doing coaching school? And I said, no, no. Like, once again, this disbelief. So other, signs here, like,
Yeah.
like the third time in my life, I'm like, what? Who am I to? Right. So I always like to just hold people by the shoulders through the screen and say, who am I to? You're made for this. And he said, we found a way for the company to cover the tuition of this coaching program.
Oh,
And
wow.
coaching program is not inexpensive. Like, it was a 5-figure investment, and it was time. It was time away from my family. It was time to study. It was time to practice. And so I went for it, and I got my coaching certification in 2017, started coaching clients. The day after I got done with my coach training, someone reached out and I was like, I can coach you. And so I just started building a coaching practice, and I started getting paid for my speaking while I was working full time. And I always was very transparent with all of my leaders about what I was doing. It was never in conflict with what my day job was there, because I loved my jobs at the time too. I was doing relationship management, business development work. And my last role at the company was as director of sales coaching and development. So talk about nothing would have ever happened if I hadn't followed these breadcrumbs. And so what ultimately, like, where I took the leap and made the pivot happened in 2020. I like to tell people I quit my corporate job with a pension before it was a cool thing to do in the pandemic. I had been building my business so much. I had set a date late 2019 that my quit date was going to be March 13th and that my last day was going to be April 4th. I had this written down. I think, like, at the time I changed all my passwords to like April 4th because I wanted that to be reinforced to me every day. And then on the morning of March 13th, I was in our home gym with my husband, and he said, do you think today's the day to do this? And I said, I've been working so hard. I can't keep doing all the things. He's like, no, I mean, like, you're going to do this, but today, like the day our governor is going to shut our state down, like, is today that I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying. I said, okay, maybe not today. So I held out for a couple more months, and I'm glad I did, because this is where positive intelligence came into my life.
Oh, do tell. How did that?
For anyone who has not listened to Caroline's episode on mental fitness, pause right now, come back to this, listen to that episode and come back, because then you'll understand, you'll fill the gap for yourself. But in January of 2020, I was invited to take the positive intelligence app-guided mental fitness program with one of my coaches that I was working with at the time. He interviewed Positive Intelligence's CEO, Shahzad Shameen, on his podcast. Shahzad's so gracious. He always is like, hey, have people experience this work? And I said, oh, I think this feels like it's something I can do for my job because it's coaching. So yeah, let's do this. And Caroline, if I can tell you, within 2 weeks, like, I felt different as a human. would be an understatement. I just felt an immediate transformation. I mean, I listened to yours, folks. I'm just going to give you the punchline. Caroline's like blood pressure went down 20 points after doing
20
this.
points. Yes. Yes.
What does that? Like,
and I did it because I was transitioning from a very stable, established career into taking this leap that I felt like I was made for. And, gosh, God, why didn't you make somebody who could support candidates all throughout their careers? Why didn't you do that? And it was like, ha, 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 because I made you. And I was getting that message very clearly. And then I saw this advertisement for coaches and a coaching grant. And I was like, grant? Yes. Sign me up for this grant. Why not? And I'm thinking I'm just going to take a couple-month program and have some more, accolades of things that I could pull from. And it changed my life profoundly. So much so that I thought, this is the missing link. This is the thing. And, I had such a aversion to mental anything aside from using my mind to do things. And my head had been disconnected from my connected yet disconnected. And then this was finally integrating more so. I'd done some therapy and things for years, but I didn't have as much of, recognizing there was something you wanted to change, logically knowing that you could change something, but then actually having the practical tools to do it and make new neural pathways in your brain. Wait, what? And that alone, not medicine changes, not anything else. My top number of my blood pressure had gone down 20 points. And of course, then, the beautiful thing about having a grant and allowing coaches to experience this is then they do want to sign on and have all their people to do it too.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
Okay, so you do this program. You
Yes.
realize it's amazing. How did you then become part of that program?
Oh my gosh, just luck beating opportunity, right? In the early days of the pandemic, I was doing weekly videos. So part of my whole path toward my own self-employment was I was a massive content creator because that's what I could do in my fringe hours working a full-time job. And so one of the content I did was I did a weekly video, and my weekly video at the end of March 2020 was what's getting me through the pandemic. And I said taking midday walks with my kids, watching slapstick guinea pig videos on YouTube. And I held up the Positive Intelligence book and I said, in doing this work. Because It's not reading the book. Let's be clear. The book is not the work. Doing the work is the work. You and I know what the work is. It's not hard work. It's just you got to do it. And so I said, I notice on days when I'm doing the work, I feel better than days I don't. And I tagged Shirzad and Positive Intelligence in the post. And at this point, the company's still really young and the coaching grant program had just started. And I'm the leader of a coaching department at a big Fortune 100 company. So they reached out to me just to be like, hey, can we talk about your experience? And I formed a really amazing relationship with Bill Carmody, the chief coaching officer. And he allowed me to have my coaches that I led at the time experience the program. And then I kept telling him hey, listen, try not, I don't want you guys to think you're the end of this company because I'm planning to leave. It's just this pandemic has kind of put the brakes on it. He said, well, why don't you come work for us? He's like, I know you're building and you're creating on your side. Just come work for us part-time. We really need help. And I said, okay, well, what do you need help with and what would that look like? And he said, really anything. So
amazing is that? Make your own job.
Doing is over the past 5 years, I have touched about every single area of the company. I came in and I helped them build out their coaching program. And on the back end of that, hired a coaching operations leader. And then in 2021, I stepped in to help build out their B2B part of their business and led client success. and have done, I mean, just tons of things. So I tell people, I'm like, I was there when the Zoom screen had 4 people on it with like the leadership team meeting. And now when we have an all hands meeting, it's anywhere from 50 to 70 people, depending on who can come live, because we have a global team. And so I have been working with them in different capacities for the past 5 years. And this year I stepped into my dream role for them, which is their lead global presenter. So I have literally gone internationally to present on the behalf of positive intelligence for companies, organizations, conferences who want to hear this message. And then hopefully from there, have their members or their team experience the work, the positive intelligence work. So I'm doing that in combination with all of the work that I started on my own in 2020, which much like you is coaching. So I do, I hold a small coaching portfolio. And then in 2020, I also wrote a book. So I had written the book. The draft was done when I started working for and with positive intelligence. And so I kind of lived these like parallel lives over the past 5 years. It's been this work that I've done to help build mental fitness because it's so compelling and so important. And it's so intrinsically connected to my body of work, which is the book I wrote is called Let Her Out, Reclaim Who You've Always Been. And even listening.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Here's the book.
Oh. And even listening to you, Caroline, on some of your podcast episodes, it's so tightly connected to the work you're doing, because at the end of the day, and it goes back to where you said, what did you do as a child? What did you know? How did you know who you really were? And I think so many of us in the grind of the day to day, in the desire to provide for our families, in the, was living up to other people's expectations versus our own, we typically lose that person. And that's where the idea for this book came from. It was actually a failed TEDx talk. I presented it to be at a TEDx conference and it was rejected. So I said, okay, I'll see your TEDx rejection. I submitted to other conferences, got accepted. All those events were canceled because of COVID. I said, okay, well, I see you canceled conferences. I'll just write a book.
It's a gift and an opportunity. Every circumstance, you can accept it or convert it. Because you had maybe been doing this thing, was that part of the resilience, or you just had always been resilient? You tell me no, I'm going to find a way. Yes.
I think inherently I've always been resilient, but I think there was always this part of me that needed a little more external validation. And I think in 2020 is when I decided to let that go. Okay. And I think that was really where I said, because you've done the work. To let go of a very secure job, and I don't know what job is secure, right? Like I'm less inclined to believe that more and more, but I feel like I was in a place that I could have made a 30-year career. But there was just the pull and the call, and it came from no one else's validation except my own to say, I know this is possible. I see a vision for myself and for the work that I'm doing that can't happen in parallel with working a full-time job. I have been able to make that happen. And so it's just really, really cool to see the work of both positive intelligence and Let Her Out almost 5 years later be in this really blossoming state where I would not look back 5 years ago and think this is what has happened now. There's so many things that have happened in the last 5 years that there is no way any crystal ball I would have ever looked into would have displayed these things.
And so now from this vantage point, what do you want your future to look like? Like, where do you go from here? You've got amazing clients, position, best-selling book, super helpful, impacting so many lives, helping with positive intelligence. Like, what else is on your horizon of thinking what you'd love your life to be like and how your career can fuel it?
Oh, it's a great question. I feel like I'm being coached right now, Caroline. No, it's great. It's great. 2025 has been a pivot year for me. And I'm not sure if this is something I'm intending to do every 5 years, because that's sort of when I was 35 is when I hired the coach. 2020, when I turned 40 is when I left the corporate world and did all this. And now I'm 45 in 2025. So who knows if I'm an every 5-year person, but I decided intentionally that 2020 was going to be another, not a pivot year, another level, as I call it, my level up year. I actually have I'm looking at my level up 1 week, 1 day at a time plan in front of me.
Oh, nice.
This year, I hired support. So I brought on an amazing online business manager. She's more than a virtual assistant. She's amazing. And I have a very amazing coach who I work with. I firmly believe all coaches should be coached themselves. And I've just decided that, okay, I've proven what's possible. I've also gotten myself out of all the administrative, managerial, operational tasks of both my own work and that of positive intelligence. And that has taken a while because when you're building all of these things, you need to be in it. You need to see how things work to then train up and hire behind you. But I've done that for my own business. And so you will see a huge new rebrand coming this summer and a new keynote coming out in September and other programs and offers being put out into the world for people who are like, hey, I want to kind of experiment on my own. So it's I'm back in creation mode, Caroline. And that's what's exciting for me because I've been in the grind again over the past couple of years. That's where I've needed to be. And now 2025 is all about back in creation. And above all things, it's about being of service and being in collaboration, whether that's speaking to somebody like you and making sure this gets out into the world, or just having those conversations about what could it look like to fill in the blank. I've been very open to that dialogue with so many different people this year.
Can you tease, is your company name changing or what is the...
Yeah, no, I'm actually going to who I am. When I started my business in 2016, I called it Small Town Leadership. And it goes right back to where we started this conversation. Everything I learned to be successful as a leader came from growing up in a town of 600 people. And that platform was so great for me for the last 10 years. It created so much blog content, connections with people, really reaffirming who I am as a person and a leader. And now I've quite frankly outgrown that. I don't want my identity to be about small town anymore. And so I am just going to be at nataliesiston.com.
Oh, nice. You are the brand.
I am.
So many people say, like, you are the brand. So nataliesiston.com. So who works with you? How do they work with you? Help us understand that. And where do they find you?
Yeah, there are two main audiences I work with. One is anyone who's planning an event where my speaking services could be of value. And so I work with a lot of women's associations, women's conferences. I'll come in and keynote or workshop about Let Her Out. Of course, I'm delivering mental fitness keynotes and webinars and workshops on behalf of Positive Intelligence. And then, I'll just say what my new keynote's going to be here, Caroline. I haven't shared this with anybody yet, but
we are so lucky.
But my new keynote is called Permission Granted.
Oh, I love it.
And it will flex to the audience that it needs to flex to, because it could be a sales team saying, hey, I want our sales team to really feel like they've got full permission to go be creative in how they explore our market, how they explore new markets. It could be a career development day where it's how do I really know that I'm the only person who has to give my permission about my career. So I'm very excited because what I found over the past several months and definitely, but even the past couple of years, so many people either come to me as a coaching client seeking permission, and no one needs my permission. You don't need my permission. But inherently, many of us have wired ourselves because of our saboteurs, our negative mental thinking patterns, that we need to have that permission. And so I want this to be a body of work that will really unleash to people to say, you are the only person who needs to give yourself permission. So the plan is for this to turn into also my second book and other types of fun. I have a high restless saboteur. So for those of you who are like, what are these words you're talking about? Go listen to the other episode. But it means I can be a bit of a swirling dervish, but it also means when channeled right, my capacity and creativity are just on fire. And so I'm so excited about Permission Granted. It was a light bulb moment that happened when I was working with a branding coach. And it was just like electricity happened in the room. And we said, this is it.
Oh, that's so amazing. This has been such an exciting, wonderful conversation. I've just learned so much more about you and even more depth behind the story. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm big on authentic success. And authentic success, I believe, is however you define it to be. How do you define authentic success in this moment?
Authentic success is when you can show up to whatever space it is that you're occupying, whether that be your professional space or your personal space, and you are completely who you are. There's no false front. There's no shaking your head yes when inside you're screaming no. It's you are aligned. There's no inconsistency. It's like if we were to put a litmus paper in your body, it would just be white. There would be no red or blue happening. It's like, okay, you are neutralized across yourself because you're not pretending to be somebody who you're not.
Oh, I love it. And you've let her out.
Exactly.
And just to be that. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And for people who are interested in like, how can I do that? Grab the book or grab the audiobook. It's a 4-step process to help you let her out. And if that's not your cup of tea, you know, Caroline's your person. Like, she's got an amazing roadmap and process for you to do this as well.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Natalie, for all of your time, all of the wisdom. And the links will be in the show notes, everyone. So be sure to check out Natalie's work, get her book, and look for her next permission granted work. So thank you so much, Natalie.
I appreciate you. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you. Natalie's story is a reminder that transformation doesn't require a dramatic break. It can unfold through consistent action, clear intention, and a deep trust in what's possible. You can explore her work at nataliesiston.com, get her book, Let Her Out, and be on the lookout for an upcoming keynote and her second book. The links are in the show notes. And if this episode spoke to something in you, if you're standing at your own edge, wondering what might be next, download the free Navigating Career Transitions workbook at nextsuccesscareers.com. It's designed to help you clarify what matters and take the next aligned step. Thanks for listening. Until next time, you already have the experience, the insight, and the creativity to build what's next. Your next success is waiting to unfold.
Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sangal. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.